Hello and welcome back to my Spider-Man life story vlog series. Today we're going to be tackling issue 4, which we'll handle on the 1990s. So Peter Parker is getting a little bit older now. He is, I think he's past midlife. He's past his 50s, if I remember correctly. Now, before I continue, I do want to apologise that this vlog will not be edited. You will not be seeing any images from the issue, and it will not be, and there won't be any images of what I'm describing. Mainly due to time. I have a very busy schedule, and secondly, finding images that I can use for this series is a very tiresome task, and to find the right ones in a way which will not get copyrighted is very much a struggle for me making these, which is why this one in particular took so long to make. So that being said, let's talk about Spider-Man's relationship with the 1990s, because for those of you who don't know, the comic book industry as a whole has a very interesting relationship with the 1990s, as it was a very difficult decade. The comic book industry, in terms of a business and as a creative landscape, was struggling as there was this whole market for overly violent, overly complicated storylines, and obviously this is my second-hand experience because I haven't read a lot of 90s comics, but I do know the history of it from what I've looked up. And I know that Spider-Man specifically has had a very rough relationship with the 1990s and the cliches and the issues that arose from the creative landscape during that decade. This all culminated in one of the most controversial storylines ever to be put on the page, with the Clone Saga, a overly expanded, overly indulgent storyline of confusing plot twists, and was overly extended due to editorial mandates. And this story that actually is referencing to that event, which is why I brought it up. This story deals with the Clone Saga, so it does deal with Ben Reilly, who we have sort of seen before in, I believe it was issue 2. He didn't have much to do. In fact, I think he was only conscious at the very end of it when Peter saves him from the burning building. But that is that's an element of this story. And right off the bat, you can probably tell, like most issues in this series, is that the story, the actual narrative, is way too short for this run of stories. So let's get into it, shall we? We start off in a situation where there seems to be a burning building. We're in 1995, if anyone's wondering, where we see a character who looks a lot like a elderly Peter Parker, and he's taking photos of a situation of this burning building. He's seemingly this photographer, and it turns out that the building was actually called whatever destroyed the building was caused by none other than Dr. Octopus, who has apparently not been seen for a long time until this point. And it's here which revealed that what we're seeing isn't actually Peter Parker taking these photos, it's Ben Reilly. And right off the bat, the issues that I have had with this series, of it being way too short, with not allowing its plot lines, its ideas to span out, becomes a massive issue here. an issue in an issue, one could say, as we don't get the feeling for this Doc Ock. We don't get a real connection with Ben Reilly here in terms of this story. And quickly, Ben Reilly is kidnapped by the Green Goblin. Not the Green Goblin, sorry. Doc Octopus. That's very embarrassing of me. I do apologise. Whilst we see at Parker's Industries, which is still going around, Peter Parker is having a discussion with Tony Stark. And I really like this scene. However, not to be harsh on Mark Bagley, but for what the age difference should be for Peter and Tony Stark, I do feel like Tony Stark looks a bit too young. I think he should have looked older. I think he should have had like completely grey hair. But that's just a small little nugget of a complaint. That is a pure nitpick. But in context of the scene, I actually do like how Tony Stark is basically presented like a sort of villain here, because he basically is talking to Peter about selling Parker's Industries and making it a part of Stark International. And Peter is like, what you have done is so amazing and so great, but I will not do this because it will go against my core belief, because Stark Industries makes weapons, and that's not what Peter Parker's Industries, what his company is all about. His is about protecting the world, making defenses, and making equipment for people. Or actually, we never actually get an idea of what Parker's Industry actually does here. But Peter makes it incredibly clear that he does not make weapons, and weapons is just something that he goes against. And Peter gets taunted by Tony Stark as he actually says like stuff like, but picture a world without Tony Stark. Imagine what your life would be like without all the weapons I saved, all the people I've saved thanks to my weapons, taking down the bad guys first. As we get this lovely panel, Mark Bagley, I've just had a nitpick from him. So to make it up to him, I suggest that I take a massive compliment. Well, he should take a massive compliment from me in that there's a panel in which whilst Tony Stark is talking about a world without him, he holds a picture of Mary Jane and Peter's two kids, showing that this life that Tony Stark has saved could have been the one that saved him and kept his family. But Peter, at this point, after his divorce and his and the separation from Mary Jane and being away from the kids, it's kind of representing that Peter Parker is a failure and that Tony Stark is a much more successful in both a career and a person. We also learn that Peter Parker has had a sort of relationship at the moment with none other than Jessica Jones. Yeah, Jessica Jones makes a appearance. Some might be surprised to learn that in the comics, Jessica Jones and Peter Parker are usually depicted as the same age. In fact, I remember hearing somewhere that they went to the same school or something, but I could be wrong there. Don't quote me on that. And Peter is uncomfortable at the moment. He's having memories of Mary Jane as he sees on these picture, and he's just kind of not in the relationship, if that makes any sense. And he goes into his secret lair where he finds his Spider-Man costume, which has had a little bit of an update. It's a bit more classic, but it has some more like padding on it to protect him from this from the sides and stuff. This is a very it's an okay costume. It's a bit too close to the classic that I can't really make a comparison to it. Like it just seems like the classic costume with a little bit extra on it. I like the little bit extra stuff on it, but it's nothing really too noteworthy. And so we get a scene of Peter Parker basically stating that, like, I'm still doing my Spider-Man stuff, and he saves this girl from this mugging. And all of a sudden then there's this massive outbreak or attack from none other than Dr. Octopus, who demands Spider-Man to show himself, as they have this really well drawn out battle in the street as Peter Parker gets to hold up a bus. There's a great moment where he says, the doctor says I should only catch cars these days, or Spider-Man, or should I say. That is just a nice little fun little moment. I especially like how most of the humorous scenes here are contained within Peter Parker's head. It's kind of implying that since he's aging, he's become a lot less quirky in terms of his personality as Spider-Man, and he, as a superhero, he's straight on point. But here is something I want to discuss, and that is the concept of Peter aging in this story, in this individual issue. So you see, we're tackling with a mini-series here in which each issue is its own individual story. And when you do that, you've got to make these stories count. And when you have a premise like this, where you have Marvel time basically non-existent, all of our characters age throughout the decades, and we have this limited time to tell a story of Peter Parker now aging, you've got to make these stories count. And I feel like this issue, there's hardly anything to do that. Sure, Peter has his struggles here. Sure, Peter is going through a lot emotionally, but nothing's really tied to his aging. It's mostly done for jokes. And I do kind of understand that in this, because it wants to tie in more with the Clone Saga, as Peter gets captured by Dr. Octopus and is shown that he is also captured Ben Reilly. And Doc Ock has this plan because he kind of believes something like after the death of Aunt May that Dr. Octopus wants to get his revenge. He's obsessed with Peter Parker, and he learns that there is this massive twist. It turns out that Peter was actually the clone all along, or at least from the viewpoint of biology, and it is actually Ben Reilly that's the real Peter Parker, who has had his life turned around, and he believed himself to be the clone, which is something which actually happens in the original Clone Saga story, and it is one of those elements that was heavily controversial and was heavily criticized by many fans. And it was one of those things where the editorial mandate and the creative decisions behind the comics were just so degrading onto the comic as the company keep changing its mind. And this story is basically, its main premise here is to tell that story in a much simpler way, to the point where we're only telling it in one issue. Can you see where the issue is here? We are telling a vastly known, complicated story, and we're trying to simplify it to a point where it will only be a prominent role in one issue. Yeah. So Peter Parker and Ben Riley have this like shock moment, this massive twist that is revolving around them. There's also Harry Osborn there. I can't remember if he was captured or if he's working for Doc Ock, but either way, the point is that he's there. And Ben Riley is absolutely distorted by this. He believes that this event has basically stolen his life. He is Peter Parker from his point of view. He has spent years believing that he is the clone. And so he just wails on Doc Ock. And Peter, the one in the Spider-Man costume at the moment, is basically like, no, you are still Peter Parker. You still have his morals. You still have his sense of right and wrong. But Ben Riley, is like, when did I didn't lose Peter's sense of right and wrong, because I am Peter. And so who am I if I'm not Peter, if I can't just, do whatever I want in terms of what I believe is right for Peter Parker. And so Peter Parker kind of calms him down and states to him, we have this nice little moment, and Doc Ock sees an opportunity here to kill Ben Riley, only for Ben's spider senses to tingle, and he avoids it, whilst Harry Osborn protects Peter Parker, and Doc Ock's arm kills Harry Osborn. And again, this is a hugely intense moment, and it's treated as just a fact to get out of the way, so that because the story is told in a very short, abrupt time. And it's just, if we knew more about this Harry, if we knew a bit more about their relationship here, I felt like this would have worked. I feel like the scene itself, completely isolated, works incredibly well. But in terms of its placement in the narrative, this death just comes off as, this will... they basically shelved Harry Osborn, if that makes any sense. And this shocks Dr. Octopus. He's like, I didn't plan on murdering him. I am so sorry. I don't want to. And he kind of freaks out and he tries to escape, only for Ben Riley to try and chase after him, shouting a murderer. However, Dr. Octopus knocks him out and gets away, as Peter is left with tears and saves Ben Riley. As Harry Osborn dies in Peter Parker's arms, and the two Peters basically have this discussion. And Peter Parker has basically got this ultimatum that essentially he's working with Apartheid Industries, and the idea of Spider-Man has just tired him out. He is just worn out. So maybe you should take on the mantle, that you should become Spider-Man. I mean, after all, you are Peter Parker. You are Peter Parker. It turns out that I'm Ben Riley. So I will live the life that the real Peter Parker shouldn't, that he will become the rich billionaire, and Ben Riley, who at this point is believed to be the real Peter Parker, is great. And this seems like a great little story, a nice little moment. However, this is only 1/3 of the actual comic book. We still have a few storylines to catch up on this small little narrative, as Peter Parker basically him and Jessica Jones are just okay, we're breaking up. So basically Jessica Jones doesn't actually play any role in this. It's just a fun little cameo, you could say. And Peter Parker starts tracking down this individual he has been asking Jessica Jones to help him with. And so he tracks down this individual, and it turns out that he is meets up with a senile Norman Osborn, the father of Harry Osborn, the original Green Goblin. And it's revealed here that Peter knows that Norman Osborn knows that he's Spider-Man. And as well, it turns out there is another twist, that the original twist wasn't actually a twist. That to basically try and mess up with Peter's life, Norman Osborn changed the tests, knowing that Dr. Octopus was after him. Dr. Octopus was trying to find out who Spider-Man is, and Peter Parker learns that Norman Osborn, because it's been revealed in earlier issues that he knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and he gave that information to Dr. Octopus, and he also changed the results of the test so it would read that Peter Parker was actually Ben Reilly, and Ben Reilly was actually Pete Parker. And so it turns out in here, Peter Parker is the original. However, he's now deciding to let Ben Reilly live his life as if he was Peter, as if believing he is the real Peter Parker, kind of giving him a conclusion to his story. And this stuff seems so wasted here. Like, I love the idea of a universe without Marvel time. I like all the concepts that we're dealing with here. I mean, it's a great idea to go back on on the Clone Saga in a way where we can try and simplify it, where we can try and make it better, because it is one of the most popular Spider-Man stories, for better or for ill. And it is actually a great idea to go back and try and clear out the details, in a sense, in a different continuity. But the way they did it here is so quick, so thing. I mean, the whole stuff with Peter Parker going to meet Norman Osborn should have been its own issue, and the revelation that because Norman Osborn is basically like, you've got a weakness and I always admired your strength, unlike Harry. And Peter's like, oh God, you don't know, didn't you, that Harry is dead. Doc Ock killed him. And this breaks down Norman Osborn, and they have a little fight. That fight where Osborn finds out his son was killed is literally like a small moment here before Norman Osborn dies of a heart attack, and his last words is just, I hate you. This is something which, from what I can gather, is hugely accurate to the 616 counterpart, where Norman Osborn is seemingly extremely obsessed with the fact that Spider-Man or Peter Parker is basically foils his plans and everything, and he's just hugely in spite of him and blames him for almost all of his problems. But again, that one little detail should have been its own issue. It should have been its own thing. And I don't know, I'm feeling like this series as a whole is starting to not be as good as I hoped it is, as it's dealing with what I want, but in a way where they get the ideas get rushed and uninteresting, because they're so stripped of any sort of emotional hook there, allowing us to only get snippets, a show reel, if you will, of moments. However, the last page in this in this issue is almost completely textless as Peter Parker goes back and goes back to Mary Jane. Now, the plot line here of Peter Parker, feeling that like Mary Jane left him and stuff, and that his life as Peter Parker, as Spider-Man, has ruined it, and now he's given up that so he can go back home and go back with Mary Jane, is a nice little touching storyline, and it is a nice way to end this. But again, it is just way too abrupt, and it's just very odd to think, like I know Mary Jane is a very archetypal love interest, but the fact that, Peter Parker has done all this, and they had that breakup in the last issue, so they've been broken up at least for around about 10 years, and this comic kind of implies that that they just kind of got back together as soon as the issue ends. It's kind of strange, but I do understand it's that walking into the sunset kind of ending where it's made to feel like everything has just turned out all right for our main characters. And that's it for this issue. Overall, I think by far this is the weakest issue so far. It deals with an idea which I'm not particularly invested in. However, I am interested in seeing. However, I feel like here the concepts needed a lot more time to develop, and I feel like the emotional hooks here don't get enough to grab the audience. And I also feel like it doesn't deal well with the concept of what life story is supposed to be. I mean, this could really take place any time in Peter Parker's life in terms of age, and it wouldn't make a difference. And that really doesn't make a difference. The only real difference it made here would have made here is what Norman Osborn's health would be, and whether he would have suffered a heart attack. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would have not had that heart attack. So yeah, this issue was kind of weak in my opinion, and I wish it could have been a lot better. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time for the fifth issue, which deals with the 2000s. I do apologise for no imagery and stuff. I hope that that this video was interesting enough without them. I do apologise for all the mistakes I've been saying throughout this video. Due to my short time schedule, I am absolutely shattered at the moment. So if I don't make much sense in this video, I extremely apologise. I guess you could say, just like this issue, I am rushing this. Vlog. So yeah. So I'll see you all next time for the next issue. So ta-ra.